Hello, everyone, and welcome back to WABAN, the movie and TV show podcast where an expert on the subject discusses things with the average viewer. I'm your host, Nim, and I am joined by Mello.
I
Chomps on chocolate.
Yeah, like his entire personality is just that
He
he's
chomps down on chocolate.
Yeah, and he's kind of rude.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. And he just always eats chocolate.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we just watched the last 12 episodes of Death Note, finished it off. I'm trying to think of like what to say. I feel like
Honestly, yeah. It's just not the same.
it's just weird because it's like they create this character who's sort of supposed to be like the replacement for L.
L 2.0.
But the problem is like it's not a bad character necessarily. It's just not the same, and also like it's not as the characters aren't as well like developed because there's not as much time with them. Like
I think the first problem is after they killed off L, it's like, okay, they need to set up a new conflict, obviously. But once they do that, it doesn't have nearly, you're not invested in it anymore.
Yeah, there's not as much time to develop to it.
This new thing that they created is just, it's new, and you're not emotionally invested, and you don't have a full understanding of each of the characters anymore.
Right, because there's 12 more episodes, and it's like they have those 12 episodes to set up those new characters and also complete the story of the whole show. So it's like, so like the entire time, like let's say Nier, for instance, the entire time Nier is just in like a room talking and like discussing their, Nier's theories on the investigation and stuff without ever meeting Light until the second to last episode. And it's just kind of like, and then like, yeah, there was a lot of that with L, of him just kind of sitting in a room discussing, oh, this is what I think with the case and stuff. But there was also a lot of more involvement with that character, especially, when you get to the episodes where he actually meets Light in real life for a bit. And there's this more intense rivalry there, whereas this is just kind of like,
right.
He needs somebody who's there to face and like be against. Okay, cool. This is Nier. Let's give him a quirky thing. Nier is constantly playing with some sort of toy. Yeah, that's Nier's quirk. There you go. Because L had his weird quirk of like
eating sweets,
constantly eating sugar. So it's like we gotta have, and then Mello, we gotta give him a quirk. He just eats chocolate all the time.
I remember when they first invented chocolate. Anyway,
that's like it's just like weird because it's like,
right.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, they try to build up these new investigators to be a foil to Kira after L's gone, but like, you don't have the emotional investment, and
yeah, I think
it's just not the same.
What I think was one of the most interesting angles that they took with these last several episodes that I actually thought was a more interesting one was that could have been developed more and could have made it more interesting was the fact that like Aizawa, one of the people in the investigation who started to suspect Light like heavily because he had those like inner monologues where he's like, was L correct in suspecting him? Like, and that I thought was kind of interesting because he's, a character who's been there from very early on in the show. He's always, he's never been like a super interesting character necessarily. He's always just been one of the members of the investigation, but he's been like, I don't know. I felt like some of that could have been interesting. I'm like, oh, a member of the investigation starts to suspect him secretly. And it's like, but I don't know. I feel like they didn't do as much with that as they could have.
I mean,
I don't know.
I thought his character was very nice in these last 12 episodes.
Yeah.
just because, like, you know, he's the one that was kicked out. Well, not kicked out, quit because of the weird test thing, and then
Right,
he
and then
came
he's
back once he proved himself with like making the police force move.
yeah, yeah.
And it was this whole like, you know, build up to this before,
Hmm.
like, besides Light, who is the suspect at that point, he was like one of the main investigators for it.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Besides,
he's just like
yeah,
against the other one, the other main investigator, the main investigator, Light.
yeah. Well,
It was a
right,
very neat
yeah,
dynamic.
yeah, yeah. I think that was probably one of the most interesting things in these newer episodes because, I mean, and they just start like introducing even other new characters, like the guy who's like he gives the notebook to,
Mm-hmm.
and then
I always find him fun.
he's fun. He's very like it's like, delete, delete. He is
I,
kind of
I I
fun.
love the moment when they first introduced him, and he's like, you know, delete, delete, but he's like running around his room, like writing in the notebook as he passes by, as if he's like a fucking Dark Souls boss,
It's
and
like
it's so cool.
you could just sit at your desk and write
Mm-hmm.
these names, but no, you're just gonna.
Like, there's one specific shot that I keep thinking of. That's like the camera looks like it's on the ground, like a couple feet back, like 10 feet
Right.
back from the desk with the notebook, and he dashes by the notebook, clearly writes something down, and then he's like just like really close to the camera in like a 3 point landing position, holding his pen out as if he just made like a huge anime running slash
Yeah, like
with his sword.
it's like trying to turn writing names in a notebook into an action scene or something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay.
But it's so fun. It's like, what are you, like the Abyss Watchers? Come on. With the Dark Souls
It's just
boss for
like
your information.
ridiculous. Yeah, yeah. It's just like ridiculous, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's so funny though. I love it.
Um yeah, and then they start to well then Misa's character just kind of becomes irrelevant in these episodes for the most part.
Yeah,
Like she's there
yeah.
a little bit, but doesn't really nothing important. I mean, I always
Mm-hmm.
found her character kind of annoying anyways, but like
Yeah.
I
I don't
don't
know.
know.
She was an interesting plot point,
Yes.
and it was very interesting to see how like Light treated her, and you know, to give us
Hmm.
like a great idea of how terrible of a person he is,
Hmm.
and how willing he is to use somebody.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
at a certain point, it's really just like, yeah, she's simping, and that's it.
That becomes the entire character. I
Mm-hmm.
think that's partially why they kind of started to like use her less in the show. They're like, all right, she served her main purpose. You know, like Rem has already died, so like the whole
Right.
connection with her to Rem is not important to the show anymore.
Yeah, I guess Rem was really the only thing keeping Light from like not fully distancing himself from her,
Yeah, yeah.
or like just killing her off
Uh,
or something other
but
for
yeah,
his
yeah,
protection.
but yeah, and they bring in a new somewhat love interest here too,
Oh
which
yeah.
is I forget her name, but it's she's
Is
sort of a more mature, more adult person than Misa is.
mm-hmm.
Misa's just kind of really annoying and childish. But then it's like so for a second there I thought, oh, maybe he actually does have legitimate feelings for her. And like does actually want her, you know, to because there's one part where he's like, you will be the goddess of the new world, you know, whatever. He tells her, and I'm like, maybe he actually believes that. I'm like, okay, because like she seems like the type of person that he could like Misa, I never, no doubt, the entire time knew he doesn't actually
well,
like her.
right. He was forced into that to begin with, and then it was
He
like,
just played it off, yeah, just
mm-hmm.
for
And it was clearly like using her. Like he was open about it too. Like
yeah.
there was no mistaking it.
But then like this new girl, I was like, okay, her personality seemed like somebody that Light could get along with. She's more intelligent. They could have more intellectual conversations, which you know is clearly something Light would like. You know, that's the
Mm-hmm.
type of person he is. Um, and so I was like, okay, maybe this is like something, but no, clearly he doesn't care about her at all either. He just throws her aside as well. So
Right.
I think this show completely answered the question of like, is there anybody he actually cares about and is not willing to kill? And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
no. Well, except for his sister. He almost killed his sister, but he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
If you remember in the one scene. But
But
other than
then
that, he
there,
was pretty
it's such a
much.
weird question that too, because like you said, he wasn't willing to kill his sister. However, while he was watching his father die, he tried to make a power play, get him to write down Mallow's name.
Oh, yeah, he was focused more on that than
Mm-hmm.
like, oh
Or
no, my
like
father is dying.
very last episode, maybe the second to last one, like he was found out and they said, what about your father? And it's like, oh, my father. And he just said his entire full name as if he was fully disassociated from it.
Hmm.
Like, okay, yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's weird because it's like I almost feel like this is 12 episodes was too many episodes, but also not enough at the same time. Because it's like it
Yeah,
wasn't enough to develop some of the new characters, but it was also too much because it felt like it was dragging on, and I was like, all right, let's just get to the end already. You know
I
what I
know
mean?
exactly what you mean. Yeah,
Yeah.
this is the first set of episodes we watched that I didn't watch all the way through in one sitting because I was like, wow, I just watched seven. Yeah, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, you're like, I didn't want to
Because
watch.
it's
Yeah.
just, I don't know, it not quite filler, but you're just not interested in some bit, unlike all the rest of the episodes that
Yeah,
fully
yeah.
grab your attention.
Yeah. And it's weird too because the first of these last 12, episode 26, the one right after Elle dies,
Mm-hmm.
most of the episode was literally a flashback.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then it was like the last 8 minutes or so, or 5 minutes or something, was like actual new content. It was weird.
I don't know, I did like that episode though. It was, it reinforced everything that you already knew and made sure you didn't forget any of it. And then the 8 minutes after, as you said, it caught you up to where you needed to be quickly.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Because I think that was before they introduced Mello and Near,
Mm-hmm.
I believe. Yeah. Because that was like episode 27, I believe, maybe. I don't know. Or maybe it was at the end of that episode. I don't remember. But yeah, it was interesting because you find out that there's this orphanage or whatever, this institute for orphans that turns for special
Yeah,
gifted orphans or
yeah,
whatever. Then
that
it
the
turns out,
butler funded and created.
right, but created with the purpose of figuring out who could succeed L, become the next L, basically,
Mm-hmm.
or yeah.
And it's a neat idea to have oh yeah, L's dead. That causes this whole series of events. I guess the idea was that if he didn't get to his computer and do a specific thing, then after a certain amount of time, a message would be sent out.
Right, right.
As a just in case scenario. And it's a neat idea for his successors to get that and take up his last remaining case.
Yeah,
But
it just felt kind of thrown in there just to be like, where are we going to find a new person to take on Kira? There we go. That it felt like it was kind of because it's weird because it's you have this entire show up to this point, 25 whole episodes, and then suddenly this is just thrown in episode 26 or 27 or whichever one it was.
right, yeah,
It's just kind of okay, now this is the thing that exists, and these are characters that exist. Okay.
yeah. The first problem is definitely just they killed off L, their entire opposing force to the protagonist or whatever you want to call them,
Mm-hmm.
pro antag, I don't know. But after they did that, they needed to create a new one, and as you don't have the same investment, which causes a whole series of other problems later on when you're just yeah, this probably would have been cool if it was L, because I
Oh
would,
yeah,
we all love L already, but you haven't developed that relationship between the audience and these characters yet.
yeah, yeah. And again, like I think the problem with a character like Nier is the like almost the entire time you see that character, he's just sitting in a room talking about like here's what I think about this case. Here's
Mm-hmm.
my theories. Here's what we should do next, and not actively doing anything
Yeah,
until the last like two episodes.
the
Whereas
way
like
I the way I saw it was Nier was L's logical side and Mello was L's like impulsive side,
mhm,
which is like it's a neat idea to have
right,
these two opposing like characters that are after the same goal.
uh huh.
But the one that would be interesting, the impulsive one, is barely shown throughout the 12 episodes.
Yeah, he's not like the main one, and then he
Mm-hmm.
dies, and you're like, okay. Well, I mean, he
And
dies
then,
with only a couple episodes left, but still, like,
yeah, but he doesn't appear in all of them. He appears in like 5 of them or
yeah,
something.
he's not in it as much. Yeah.
But Nier, the one that is there all the time, doesn't have like the emotional side of L that like made him a good character and made him enjoyable. And so it's just like, yeah, he's not a character, he's a plot point.
Right, because with L, a lot of it was you would. A lot of his character was very logical and very like methodical, thinking about things, but there was always that side of him where you could tell like he had like he was a real human
Mm-hmm.
kind of. Whereas Nier is very you know not necessarily a bad character, but just doesn't have that. I don't know, never has that sort of attachment. Like you never
Right.
feel that attachment to the character. It's just kind of it's near as just the logical thinking detective
Mm-hmm.
who has like a little quirk or whatever, who's a little
Yeah.
quirky, and that's it.
And it's not relatable and it's not enjoyable to watch. It's just like factual.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas L was like, yeah, Akira hates to lose because I also hate to lose. And that whole dynamic played throughout like the entirety of the 25
Yeah,
episodes.
and there were
And
those
that was amazing to
moments.
watch.
Yeah, and there were those moments like where he said things like, "Oh, Light, you're the closest thing I've ever had to like a real friend or whatever." He
Mm-hmm.
said, and part of you thinks maybe he's like he's being honest about that in a way, you know?
Yeah, and that creates an entire new dynamic that was very amazing to watch unfold.
Right?
Because, like, they are enemies, but they are getting closer as friends because they
Yeah.
are enemies.
And then that last episode, with the episode that he died in, even it was like the whole build up to it. The whole episode was like just the two of them kind of talking and like having
Mm-hmm.
and like, and you could like, and then you could feel sort of some weird emotional attachment to it. Like it was just like, yeah. And by the end of the episode, it was like, oh, holy shit, Elle just died. How do I feel about
Yeah,
this? It was not, yeah, it was
it's like
intense.
they give you plenty of warning, but it still hits hard.
Yeah.
And, like, I don't know, it was a great episode when that happened, but afterwards, they just didn't know what to do. They didn't know how to keep it going.
Yeah, and I don't think these last the 12 episodes or so are necessarily horrible. I just
Oh,
don't think
no.
they're just not as good. Like I definitely think there's some interesting things in there. I definitely did get to a certain point though where I was like, okay, this whole like, well, I did this because I knew you would think this, and like that's the whole thing starts to get old after a while. I'm like,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I found, like, because in the first 25, there was either, like, Ryuk there to be, like, the audience surrogate of, like,
mhm.
yeah, I'll explain it to Ryuk so that the audience also knows. And they did that in, any number of ways, and it always kept you up to speed. But it was kind of, these last 12 episodes, it was kind of lacking with all
Yeah.
those explanations.
Well, that and like it just felt like I feel like the earlier episodes of the show any point in the investigation where, Elle figured something out or whatever, or there was some sort of like, whatever, I was always kind of like, okay, yeah, I can see where that would come from. That makes sense. It made sense where he
Mm-hmm.
was going with things. In these last several, I just started to get like a little like anytime they'd get into like some description of like, this is what my thought process, because this, I was like, what? What did you just? I was like, I'm sorry, I lost it. Or then like in that last episode when he's like, haha, you thought you were replacing pages in the real notebook, but that was actually a fake notebook. And then I switched it out with the real notebook later. Well, actually, I switched out that fake notebook with a fake notebook. So, and that's I was just like,
Yep.
just like, I'm like, I knew you would do that. So then I switched this. I'm like, how did you know that he was like? I guess you just like it was just a lot. I was like, okay,
Mm-hmm.
it's a lot.
I know. It was very kind of like childish pseudo logic kind of thing. Or like, well, you might have done that, but I've done this, which undoes that, and blah blah blah. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, but yeah, I don't know. I definitely think there's some good parts of these episodes.
Mm-hmm.
But
I
it's
I
just
liked the episode that introduces the like prosecutor guy that is like, he hands off the notebook to do his bidding, and then the episode after that, I really like those two. I think
yeah,
it's because
yeah,
it was pretty much all about this one dude and how it builds him up as this temporary Kira that's serving Light. I don't know.
yeah. He was definitely an interesting character, kind of. I
Yeah.
think I don't, it was definitely kind of interesting to see some of these sort of like, oh, what is the world like with
Oh
Kira
yeah.
now? Because now there's definitely like a time jump of like a few years or whatever. I think.
Yeah, because at the end he says that it was 6 years since he picked up the notebook.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it was probably
Did he
like
say
at
six?
least, yeah, it was.
Okay. Yeah, and obviously the first 25 episodes might have been a couple years too. I don't know
Mm,
exactly. It's hard to
I
tell.
think it was maximum 1 year. I don't think it would be more than 1 year, but I could be wrong.
It's hard. It's hard to tell. I feel like there's definitely probably a timeline you could find online somewhere. I'm sure,
No,
but
probably, yeah.
but um but yeah, no, and you kind of see what the world is like after sort of just sitting with Kira working. And like, Kira has worked for like unopposed for the past few years at this point, and you can kind of see what the world is like now. And you see like there's, TV stations that praise Kira specifically, you know, to appease the god, kind of, the god Kira,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah. And like people are scared of him, like scared to put their name on the internet.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a little shot of like kids arguing, and one's like, I'm going to put your name on the internet. And like, no.
Mm-hmm. Or
Uh,
the guy that was arrested and they're like in the interrogation office just filling out a report and
it's
he's
like,
like,
what's your name?
no, not my
No,
name.
no, no. Don't. I don't want you to see my face. Yeah, yeah. And so it was interesting to see some of that. And like, I thought it was interesting the TV station that like was like, oh, the kingdom of Kira
Mm-hmm.
Kingdom or whatever, and they were like playing off this whole like Kira is our god, and we're gonna create this essentially castle to Kira, whatever.
And it was
And
very clearly just like a big scam or like just
right,
over the
right,
top and not something that he wants.
yeah. But it's interesting too because it's like this in a way sort of and then he obviously ended up killing them because he's like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
they're a
Delete,
disgrace.
delete.
That's not who I want. Well, I mean, yeah, he killed them, not
Yeah.
the actual hero. But it kind of mirrored the idea of like ancient worship of gods and stuff of like,
Oh, yeah.
oh, it's like a lot of ancient, worship of certain gods is like they're very specific about the exact way things need to be done, because if you don't worship in just the right way, the gods are going to be angry and want to kill you. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
these people, despite the fact that they were all for praising Kira and stuff, weren't worshiping the god in the right way. So, Kira killed them. You know
yeah.
what I mean? It's like kind of a somewhat of a thing. Like, I kind of made me think of that kind of idea, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Mhm. Yeah, this show does that kind of stuff a lot. Like we
Mm-hmm.
mentioned before that Elle washing Light's feet is, or yeah, was like, that's a biblical thing. And then Elle dying on the staircase because he can neither go to heaven nor hell, and so he dies on the middle of the staircase.
Oh yeah, I
Well,
didn't even think about that. That's like
yeah.
so he's like in the middle because he can't go up or down. Yeah, heaven
Hmm.
or hell. It's like a
Or
visual metaphor. Yeah.
the fiance of the FBI agent just walking upstairs towards a noose that is very clearly like it's just a visual thing. It's not actually there. It's just
Oh yeah,
metaphorical.
there's so much metaphorical imagery in this show, like
Mm-hmm.
tons. Yeah, and everybody has this sort of like intense thought, like when characters intensely like in thought of something or whatever. They have this like extreme version of themselves that has a very specific hair color and eye color,
Yeah.
like because L's is like red, or no, L's was blue.
Mm-hmm.
Lights is
Lights is red.
red,
Yes.
L's was blue, and like I saw even has one here where his hair turned green. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's like
Like, whoa, look
very,
at this guy.
yeah. It's like
They
it's
only used
just
that once, though, I think, and it was very jarring. Like, oh, he's suddenly part of it, too.
yeah, he suddenly has this special hair color thing too.
Mm-hmm.
Because like all the characters have like either like brown or like black hair, or I guess some might have blonde hair. But like it's just funny because like I don't know. Well, I guess Nier has like white hair.
Yeah,
So,
for whatever reason.
but yeah, whenever I first saw Nier, I knew I was like, that's supposed to be like a very obvious like L sort of reference. Like the
Oh,
way
yeah.
Nier was sitting and like
The way they immediately introduce his, like, little fixations,
yeah,
like the twirling of the hair and the constant playing with toys.
yeah, yeah, exactly, yeah. But
It's just like, hey, here's our second L. Here you go. You like this one too, right? It's like, no, we make
it's
him more
not the
likable,
same.
please.
It's not the same. Yeah,
Yeah.
and again, it's not even really a bad character. It's just not
Mm-hmm. You
not
just don't
great.
have the same investment.
Yeah,
And there's
exactly.
nothing
Like,
to latch on to create that investment because
yeah,
he's just logic. And like he has like, his toy gimmicks and stuff like that. But that's all, they never play into that. It's just like a background thing.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like I don't know. It's just weird because and like they tried to play the whole like weird reaction when somebody sees what Nier looks like. So like Aizawa went to meet Nier and like he took off he's like, why do I have a blindfold or whatever? Because he wasn't trusting Light. So he went to meet him and he like they pull it off and he like has this like reaction like like he
Mm-hmm.
like based on like how he looks or how his appearance is. And I'm like, you did the same thing with L.
Yeah.
Like
You
come
worked
on.
with Elle for how long? Like,
Like
come on,
you shouldn't
really?
be surprised them being like these like children, you know?
Your previous boss gave Mochi I think it was like a strawberry. It's like, here, take this. I'll give it to you if you don't tell anybody. And Mochi just puts it in his pocket, and now this is what's shocking you?
Yeah, it's it's just weird. I'm like, okay. Cuz like at first when they did it with L, it was like they met L in like episode like I don't know, 5 or 6 for the first time, I think. Like early on, like when they first
Mm-hmm.
met L in person and they had that episode there, they had that reaction. That made sense cuz they're, at that time they probably were expecting, like a normal, put together person,
Yeah,
maybe even older,
like a very systematic and
Yeah. But
like
then he was
logical
just
person.
this weird, quirky guy who's like, you
Just
know,
eats sweets and sits weird and
and he's pretty young too. He's probably like, I don't know. He's probably like, uh, probably close. Like, I don't know how old Elle was. They never really said, but not very old.
yeah,
Like
early
closer
20s
to,
maybe.
yeah, probably closer to Light's age at least.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe slightly older.
I do
Um,
remember once he said to Light, when I was your age or something like that, and he was like, "You're going to the same school that you entered at the same time. Shouldn't you actually be his age?"
well,
And
I
so
mean,
it was very
I guess
confusing.
technically you can go to college, start going to college even like a few years after you graduate high school, whereas like you could, whereas like
Mm-hmm.
Light did right away. Although wait, no, he did show up in the school though, like to do the exam, like actually at the school before he
Yeah.
graduated. That's right. Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming he just found a way to get in just so he could. He found a way to. Obviously, he didn't actually go to school, so he found a way to like
Mm-hmm.
get in just so he could
Yeah.
watch over Light. but yeah, no, that was like weird to me. It's like, they're playing off this like, whoa, he's just this like kid, whoa, like reaction. It's just this kid playing with toys. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, I feel like that wouldn't surprise you at this point.
Right. It
It's just
should have
weird.
been like, oh, it's another L. Okay,
No, it's another one of them.
I've seen this kind of person before. I get it.
But yeah, no, they definitely in the last episode tried to play off the idea that like that Nier could have never done it on his own because to match L's level, it had to be Nier and Mello working together, kind of, because they
Mm-hmm.
brought up the whole idea of how like Mello, what Mello did, gave Nier the information that Nier needed, which I still wasn't sure exactly what that was all
Well,
about. I was confused.
okay. So there was a flashback to Mello talking to one of the investigators that was with Nier, and he was like, "So somebody needs, we need the notebook to be used, right? Okay, I'll be the one for it to be used on." It's like, why did they know that? Like, I guess they were just trying to gather more information about the notebook, so they wanted to test it. I
Mm-hmm.
guess from like the other side, see what happens, since they had someone watching the supposed notebook. However, like, I don't know, it's just kind of a weird thing. Like, you already know how the notebook works. Why would you need to test it
Yeah.
again through this?
Well, and it was weird too, because like throughout most of these episodes, Nier is already pretty sure who Kira is. So there's not
Mm-hmm.
even much of a mystery there of like,
Yeah, he's literally just trying to gather solid evidence.
so that he can and then find a way to actually corner him and get him. Like
Mm-hmm.
like okay, you already pretty much know at this point, but whatever, just play it out, I guess. um, yeah. I feel like that's another thing that made the episodes drag a little bit was like I'm like they already know. Just just
Mm-hmm.
just
Well, yeah,
free.
like the dynamic between Light and L was like, yeah, L was certain. He was certain. He wanted it to be true that Light was Gira, but then every once in a while they pop up something like, no, he couldn't have done this. That's impossible.
But there was never solid evidence. But there
Mm-hmm.
was he always had this hunch, kind of, right? Well, and also I think that was a very different dynamic too because L did not know about the notebook for the longest time, right? He
Right.
had no clue about the method of killing. So that sort of created this idea of like, you know, he has all this evidence and he has all of this sort of patterns that he can figure out, but he can never figure out how the killings happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
And
once
so it was
he
just always a
right,
block on his investigation.
right, and as soon as he figures out how, that puts all the pieces together and it all makes sense. But
Mm-hmm.
like from the beginning, Nier already has that information. Already knows, already found out about the Death Note and already knew. So it was like that was never really a block. So it was just kind of like you already know that it's, and then like there was already so much evidence to the point where it's like, yeah, it's probably Light. Like,
Mm-hmm. Like all they wanted was solid proof to be able to make an arrest. But it's just like, if that's all you're gunning for, that's not nearly as interesting as I'm pretty sure it's him. I want it to be him, but what if I'm wrong? I can't do anything if I'm like,
yeah,
I've tried all this stuff to try to catch him in the act or to do this or whatever, and it's never worked. He's always slipped past my traps.
yeah, yeah. There's just not nearly the same level of the interesting back and forth between the
Mm-hmm.
characters, definitely. But I don't know.
It's just not the same.
It's not the same. I think that's the thing. Is like I don't know if I agree with the idea of like it should have ended at episode 25. I definitely think there's like I don't think that's a good ending, but like it definitely I feel like shouldn't have gone on for 12 more episodes.
I I
Or
don't know. I
like
honestly think 12 episodes is a good amount if they would have used it better.
that's true. I Yeah, I mean they could have. It's just really hard to know like what to do
Mm-hmm.
without
They
L. That's
threw
the
out their
problem.
entire story dynamic, and
Right.
then they had to rebuild it, and like that's a brave thing to do, and like I give them chops for that. But
Right.
like,
But like it's one like it's not a necessarily I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea for L to die in the show. It's
no, and
just
it's like that episode was a great episode. You can't hate that episode.
oh yeah, it was. It was. Um and like him standing out in the rain and everything, like
Mm-hmm.
at the beginning, like that in the build up to it, that was a great episode.
It's so well done.
But it's just like, what are
What?
you gonna do after?
Yeah. What now? Like,
Because the thing is, to me, I'm like, okay, something has to happen because like Light can't win. That's my thing. I'm like, he can't win. He's terrible. He can't win. Like he has to die or something. Like, come on.
yeah, the
But
entire time when he's like all the rules of the notebook that you like either they read out or literally in the show or like in between like the commercial cuts where they display
yeah,
the rules, it's constantly saying like you can either go to heaven or hell or you will eventually die no matter what and blah 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 this blah 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 that lifespan this lifespan that, and it's like okay, there is an end to Kira at some point, and not showing that is just blue balling us.
yeah, yeah. Especially since he's such a terrible person. I want to
Mm-hmm.
see him die. I want.
Yeah, they build him up as a terrible human being just so you can see him fall.
Yeah, right. But without L there, it's not the same. So it's also you're also like, this would be a good place to end it, but it also wouldn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like I don't know. It's just interesting. I definitely feel like they could have done more with his father as a character too. Like, so he dies not that far in to these next 12 episodes. Like, not
Yeah,
far after L dies, and I don't know. I guess I was just thinking they would do something more interesting with it. Like, eventually his father would find out, solid proof that he's Kira, and then like,
like be conflicted about telling somebody or confront his son about it, and then
yeah,
Light's like, okay, do I kill my dad? What's happening? Like, who do I prioritize, Light or Kira? Which identity is me?
yeah. So I don't know. I just feel like they could have done something more interesting with that, and then they just kind of had him die, and I was like, okay, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know.
It's I don't know, they built up so much in that 25 episodes, and they tore it all down on the 25th in this glorious display that was amazing to watch. And then you're like, okay, we're in the Rebel right now. What do we do? um, pick up the pieces and start again. Okay. It's like, but they didn't, it didn't work, right? It was just, you could tell it just kind of thrown together ish.
Yeah, yeah, you can tell they're just like, okay, we need to find a way to get to a good conclusion. How are we going to do that? We just have to. Like, like, it almost feels like the show wasn't planned out well enough ahead of time in a way. Like I don't know, which could be the case. Like those last 12 episodes did not feel like they were planned ahead at the same time as the other 25. You know what I
So,
mean?
okay, I know that there's a manga that came out before this, like
Oh,
there is
that's
with pretty
true.
much every anime. I don't know how accurate the anime is to the manga. I imagine not too unaccurate or inaccurate, I should say. But maybe these last 12 are like kind of different.
I don't know.
Or maybe like the manga,
Maybe the
like,
manga establishes those characters earlier on.
right. Maybe they like, there's definitely a ton of stuff that we miss from the manga. Cause like, I think the manga even lets you know L's name and everything.
Oh, really?
I think. I'm not actually sure.
Hmm.
But you, it might be a thing like, oh, there's a couple chapters in the manga that like are just skipped over or like brushed across just to give you enough information to go on in the anime.
Yeah, yeah,
Which like maybe those few chapters make the manga so much better for these last few or this last storyline, this last saga, I guess if you want to call it.
yeah. Well, that's interesting because like it's technically one season. So like, is there a specific way to separate it? You know what I mean? Like, obviously, everything after episode 25 is very different than everything before. But like,
Mm-hmm. I don't actually
it's
know
just
because like
interesting.
there's a bunch of DVDs that are of separate parts of it. I'm actually gonna look up Death Note manga
Yeah.
stuff.
Death Note manga stuff. Is that what you're
Yeah,
looking at?
stuff. Sure. No, I don't want the box set. I just want information.
Yeah. I, I don't know. It's interesting. I sometimes they have like YouTube videos where it's like, here's what's different about the manga to the anime.
Yeah, that's I don't know. I just wanted like a quick wiki thing of like that. So like here's some differences. Like oh, there's these chapters that are completely skipped over, but it's not giving me that right now.
Yeah. Well, maybe look into that later. Maybe I'll look into that later. That's interesting. But yeah. So what? How do you feel about how the show ends though? Because obviously, like those 12 episodes are a little,
Yeah,
not
they're
bad, but not
disappointing.
great. They're just kind of. I'd say they're mediocre
Mm-hmm.
overall.
I think that last episode was actually. I think it was a satisfying end. Like I was
Mm-hmm.
constantly questioning a few things. I was like, okay, this is finally coming to an end. That's nice. But like seeing Light finally admit that he's Kira and like, start breaking down or like have this one last big hurrah of like trying to trick people, like being the confident god of this world in front of all these people and trying to like portray himself as
Yeah.
like very regal and everything
Yeah, and
before
like
just getting shot.
seeing Masuda's reaction too,
Mm-hmm.
which is interesting because he's always been kind of just the the like dumb goofball of the group, like he's always the one that where people are like, Matsuda, take this
Mm-hmm.
seriously, come on. Like he's always make joking around and being like weird, but then like in this moment, like he's the one who like pulls out the gun and shoots him. Like I think that was kind
Yeah.
of interesting.
He was like, before anyone else, just immediate quick draw. It's like,
Yeah,
whoa, didn't know he had it in him.
right. Yeah, exactly. Like I was expecting like Aizawa to be the one to do it, but then Matsuda is just like, bam, and I'm like, oh, all right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, but then like because in you can see his emotion too, because obviously he didn't really think that Light was Kira.
Yeah, he was fully betrayed for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. And like, he always liked Light and was like, fine with that. And like, and then for this to happen, it's just like, it was
Mm-hmm.
just like huge. And he's thinking about like, his father dying, Light's father, who was also like a big mentor to him as well. The chief was, because you saw even from the first episode, Matsuda and the chief were like, not, or maybe the second episode, were like together at that like conference where like
Yeah,
Al first
yeah.
came in, and so you could see that from the very beginning, like he was always a big mentor to him, figure to him, and he's like, you let your father die, and like, so it was really interesting to see sort of his reaction to it as well. So I
Mm-hmm.
definitely think there's a lot of good stuff in the last couple episodes here.
Yeah, I mean, Light's emotion, especially, I really enjoyed because you get to see like the crazed god complex. Like, first, him being like, yeah, I am the god of this world, just fully revealing it and just being like, what are you gonna do? Before quickly turning into this crazed, like, wounded animal dragging himself across the floor and then running.
Yeah, and as he's running, he's like remembering himself when he was younger, like
Mm-hmm.
before, you know,
When he was just a normal, good, skilled kid.
yeah, and possibly thinking like, why, like, where did all this go? Where did everything go wrong? Why did if only like almost remembering those is like the good old days of like, what if why can't I go back
Mm-hmm.
to that?
What if he
But
never
it's,
got the notebook back and he could just continue on like that? Because he was like a good guy when he forgot the notebook and before he had the notebook.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's like having it that power has like driven him to this madness, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like he's just sort of remembering the innocence that he had at one point.
Yeah, absolute power corrupts absolutely and whatnot.
Yeah. Well,
And oh, and Ryuk just being like, hey, remember what I said? I would be the one to write down your name in my notebook? And just this dramatic him riding out with the red eyes glaring down from this pillar in the sky.
yeah. Well, and he's like, in perfect Ryuk fashion, he's like, yeah, if you're locked up in prison for the rest of your life and I have to be with you until then, until you die, then that's gonna be pretty boring. So
Let's get this over with now, shall we?
he's like, it was fun while it lasted.
Mm-hmm. We entertain each other for quite a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, Ryuk's characters stayed consistent throughout the entire show.
Yeah.
he's he just wants to fight boredom. That's pretty much
Mm-hmm.
it. What's interesting is you think about it, like all of this happened because of Ryuk too. Like he dropped that notebook. Like,
Mm-hmm.
yep.
How many notebooks does Ryuk have now? Because he started out with two, with the one that he dropped, and then he just got that one back
Well,
from
didn't
Light.
the one that he originally dropped was stolen from that other guy.
Right. But it. Oh, okay,
The
wait
one
a
that's
second. So wait, there's Ryuk's one that he actually owns, the one that he dropped and gave to Light, which then went back to the original Shinigami that it had. Then there's Rem's, and Rem's second one that she got from the dead one. So wouldn't Ryuk actually pick up the Rem's and the second one that Rem had, so he would have three then?
potentially. Yeah, I don't really know. I kind of lost track of which notebook was where at one point.
Mm-hmm.
So I really don't know.
Yeah, it
I gotta.
gets like too complicated to be understood at a certain point, unless you
Yeah,
like really focus on it, and nobody wants to.
yeah. Well, because there was definitely two notebooks at one point. There was three at one point, but then the one guy came back to take his. I don't think they ever brought up the extra notebook though, the one that was Rem's that Light took. Maybe they did at one point. I don't know.
Well, okay.
I was confused.
So the prosecutor guy, like the pseudo Kira, he had one. Then there was Misa's one that Light kept on his person, like in his waistband, constantly touching him, which then Misa gave up, losing her memories, causing him to be the owner of it. But like, that would be the only two, because the one flew away with the other Shinigami, and then there's Ryuk's that he just always has and isn't a factor ever. But the thing that I don't get is, obviously Nier had the prosecutor's notebook at a certain, like he stole it and in order to do his little trick for Light. But where'd the one that Light constantly had on him go? Like, did he just not bring him with him? Bring it with him that
I
day?
don't know.
Where was it?
I don't know. The show honestly might have forgotten. Maybe Ryuk picked it up when Light died. Maybe he left it somewhere and then Ryuk picked it. I don't know.
It just became hard to keep track of at a certain point. It was just
like how many death notes are there? But
mm-hmm.
I did love that episode where the other Shinigami comes down and he's just like, Ryuk, where's my notebook? Give me back my notebook. Like that guy was like he just wants his notebook back.
Mm-hmm. And you just like, okay, I need to get this notebook back somehow. Well, this guy owns it, and he just yoinks it out of the guy's hand, causing it to float up from their perspective, and just drops it on the guy's head. Like, cool, now you can see me. Give me my notebook back.
Yeah, it's just
he's just such a like, yeah, I don't want to deal with this, so
he's just like, oh, come on, I just want my notebook back. Ryuk took my notebook. But like I don't wonder why like what took him so long to decide to go find his notebook too. Because at that point it's been a while.
Oh yeah, it was like 6 years.
So like he's finally like, I guess I'll go get my notebook. Ryuk is like so annoyed by him. He's like, I don't have your notebook.
I don't know where it is.
I don't know where it is. You want it?
Go
find it. Go for it.
But the new Shinigami is just such a like. He's such a non-character. Like he's just lazy, pops up for like 2 or 3 episodes and then leaves.
Just so he can get his notebook back.
Mm-hmm. And he's complaining the entire time, like, I don't want to be here. You stole my notebook. I need it back. And so I can just get back to lazing around the house again.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because what is a god of death without their death note? Like, they can't kill anyone that way. So
even
like, what's
with
the point?
the death note, they just seem to lay there and not do anything.
Until they need to kill somebody.
Mm-hmm.
Like, oh, yeah, I guess this person's lifespan's getting out close to ending. Yeah, I'll kill them. I'll write their name down. Cool.
Like, I want a series where they explore the Shinigami world and how, like, you know, maybe Ryu comes back and is like, okay, I'm bored. I got like 6 years of entertainment out of that guy. You know, let's try to spruce his place up a bit, you know, make it less boring. And, you know, maybe I'm like trying to transplant apples there or something. Just like,
oh yeah, it's
some
just
little
like,
thing of him being like,
starts growing apples. Well,
mm-hmm.
the one episode he was like, he brought back like he's like, here's what an apple from the Shinigami world is like.
It's just sand.
It's just gross.
Mm-hmm. Misa takes a bite and it's like, it's just sand. Ugh.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I think I definitely think the show has a nice conclusion, but it's just a lot of those episodes to get to the conclusion are a little.
Yeah, it's just like, okay, can we just kill Light already? Just get it over with. Stop beating the dead horse. It's already dead.
That's how I felt.
Yeah.
But no, that last I did really like that last episode though.
Oh yeah, so. That's very well done. They have a few good episodes in these last 12, and they are really good. But
there's definitely stuff that I liked about him. It's just it's definitely not as good as the earlier points of the show.
It's still Death Note, but it's not the same.
But it's not, yeah.
It's just not the same.
But, yeah. I don't know. Do you have much more to say about it other than that?
Nah, it's just not the same.
It's just not the same.
It's just not the same.
I miss Elle.
Yeah.
That's how I felt like anytime they mentioned Elle,
Mm-hmm.
and like they would show like an image of him, because they would show like he'd be like, oh, this feels like I'm fighting against Elle again. And you'd see like an image of Elle. I'd be like, oh, I miss
Right.
him.
Or like at the very last few minutes of the episode, him seeing like Elle's phantom there.
Yeah, but I was just like, I miss Elle.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime they'd like see him or mention him, be like, he's probably my favorite character. So I think in the
Yeah,
show.
yeah. I mean, it's either Elle or Light, and I don't want to say it's Light because Light's a terrible person.
So it's Elle. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
it's Elle.
Well, no, I mean that is what
Or
makes the
maybe Ryuk,
show.
actually.
Ryuk's pretty
Yeah,
fun.
Ryuk's a fun character.
Um, but those are the two characters that make the show what it is. So
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
they are like the show.
Mm-hmm.
It's Light and Elle. It's the battle between Light and Elle.
And then they threw one away and didn't
And
know
they,
how to fix it.
yeah, but they end with still a good conclusion, and so it's fine. But yeah. So, anyways, I'm probably about good with closing now. If you are.
Yeah, I'm good.
All right. So, yeah, thank you for listening to WABAN. So, next week on WABAN, we are going to have a guest on. And that guest is going to be a guest that we have had before. Our first ever guest, Artur Parks from our YouTube channel, Artur. He will be on again. So, we'll have him on again. That'll be really exciting. I'm actually really excited to do that again. He was a really good guest. I think all of our guests were really good, but he was also really good. Anyways, so that'll be next week. And the week after that, I believe we're planning on watching the live action Death Note movie from Netflix.
Oh, right. I forgot about that. Oh, boy.
So you think these last 12 episodes are bad? This is probably much worse.
Why you make me do this?
You know what? I thought it'd be fun to compare. Compare it to the show, just to see.
I get it, but it is cruel and unusual punishment.
Well, it'll be fun. It's not too long of a movie. I think it's like an hour and 40 minutes or something. So, but yeah. So, and then the week after that, we will do. We'd be discussing whatever movie Parks suggests for us. And then at some point, we're going to start a new show. But we're going to take a little break from that for a little bit. We might not do it until after the new year. We're not sure yet. Or after Christmas. We haven't sure exactly when we'll start a new show, but we definitely will. We're just going to take a small break, because usually we've been doing every other week as a show. It'll be more than 2 weeks till we do a show again, but that's okay, because the next show we're going to do, I believe, is most likely going to be Legend of Korra. I think that's. Does that sound good to you?
Yeah, that works.
Yeah, I think that should be fun. So yeah, because I feel like it's an interesting, since we did obviously Avatar, and I think that'd be an interesting sort of like discussion. I think can be interesting discussion in there. Even if it's the show, I personally don't think it's as good as Avatar, but there's definitely interesting stuff to talk about there. But yeah, so that'll be at some point. I don't know exactly when we'll start that, but that should be our next show. But yeah, so if you want to listen to WABAN, there's any other platform than what you're listening to it on now. There's multiple different places you can listen to it on. Multiple audio platforms, that being Spotify, Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Those are the places you can typically find it on. But yeah, they're also eventually it's going to be available on the WABAN YouTube channel, which that's another thing. We have a YouTube channel. There'll be a link in the description to that. I don't know when we're going to start putting content on there. It's still in the works. There'll be some gaming content there and the podcast. So Yeah. Also, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is Nim TV, and at some point I'll put new content on there.
Eventually.
I'm working through some stuff. It's just I have a lot of things going on, so it's very difficult to. I'm very busy, so but I'm working through some ideas. Um, yeah, and you can listen to a new episode of WABAN every single Saturday at noon Eastern Standard Time. That's when you can expect a new episode every single week. So, yeah, yeah. So that's it. I've been Nim.
And I'm Cub.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye bye.